government fails, the world's off its rails, leaders are whacked, democracy is under attack. It's time to get smart, folks, time to get real. Let's cut through the crap, tell us how you feel. Let's pull back the curtain and open the door. Get some stuff that's not bought and paid for. It's her border to border, coast to coast. Let's cue the talent, let's meet the host. Podcast by George.
Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George. Well, we're back online, and I'm telling you, I think maybe folks are going to have more reason to go online than ever before. I don't know if anybody's tuned in television during this shut-in, this self-quarantine that we're in for the coronavirus, but my God, nobody can watch the stuff that's on network television. I even put on my Facebook page that with all the big sporting events being canceled and all the live things not occurring on national television, those guys need to step up. They need to put some good movies on. They need to put some good, intelligent content on. Maybe podcast by George would be nice, but in lieu of that, music concerts, something, my God, to fill the hours. Of course, reading a book wouldn't hurt most of America either, so let us recommend that. And to get us started here on the coronavirus, I wanted to read this op-ed piece out of USA Today, which I thought was particularly good because it was written by 16 medical professionals, and it's across all political spectrums, which is important. So let me read this. It says, COVID-19 is spreading, and you won't know that you're infected until you've already infected others. Right now, you and I have no immunity to prevent you from getting the disease. It's especially lethal for older people or those with underlying conditions. This will come to communities in waves, and it will be a marathon, not a sprint. So this ain't going to be over tomorrow, folks. And we need to pay attention, and particularly when it comes to local events here. So our hospitals won't have sufficient resources. That's what these guys are saying. Forget about it. It ain't happening. I mean, they're setting up tents. This is going to get bad enough that they're going to be overwhelmed. To what extent, we've yet to see. People's beds, ventilators, or protective gear are in short supply. And if the cases keep spreading as fast as they are in Italy, and that's kind of what they're using for their model, but there's something important that you can do, you and I and everybody, and the doc, as you can see. Stay home as much as possible. It may be in your community now, or it may be soon, until you hear otherwise from healthcare officials, even if you have no symptoms. That means avoiding play dates, sleepovers, bars, restaurants, parties, or houses of worship. Avoid all crowds. What can you do instead? Well, you can still take walks outside. You can shop for the essentials if you need them, and enjoying your online community of friends like Podcast by George and Dr. Stephen W. Schmidt. Stay connected in other ways. Check in on your loved ones and friends frequently. Keep informed about what's happening in your neighborhood. Give to people in need in your community supplies for food pantries, financial donations, personal hygiene items. Buy online gift certificates to your favorite local stores and restaurants and use them when it's all over. So if you feel you got to do that, buy them, just give them, and then go do it when this thing's over with. Be a neat freak. Keep everything as clean as possible. And they're still saying wash your hands early, often, and thoroughly. And if you're going to spread anything, spread help, compassion, and humor. Well, that's good enough to get us started, and I hope we have a little bit on the podcast today. And, of course, joining us, as I mentioned, on the Podcast by George live line today, Stephen W. Schmidt, the Lucan Endowed Professor of Political Science at Iowa State University, author of the textbook right over my right shoulder there, and a frequent guest on Podcast by George. We wanted to get back together with him, of course, because of the political scene and these Democratic debates. They had another one last night. I wouldn't blame anybody if they missed it, but they did have one. And also, I'm always curious about the coronavirus as it affects the world of academia. Doc, what's happening with you and Iowa State University?
We're going online. The students are gone for spring break. And I'm very familiar. I've used online teaching or supplementing my classes with online activities. My textbook that's behind you also is a digital virtual textbook. And it has all kinds of quizzes and short little videos for each chapter. It has essentially a classroom online. The textbook itself has that. So it's not going to be very difficult for me, although I do miss the personal interaction with my 100 some students. That's something that I enjoy. But for now, I think most of us will finish this semester, with a little bit diminished value to the classes, but I think it'll be okay. The problem is going forward, when will we come back to campus? I'm not going to my office. We're told by the president of the university and others not to do that. So is this going to run through the summer? Is this going to be a couple of months or a month, or when will things return to normal? Or are we going to become an online university for a while? And that I don't know. But in any case, we have to follow, the recommendations that you read, and that, the doctors like Fauci and others are talking about. If you want to watch TV, you're pretty much going to be listening to people telling you to wash your hands and to stay at home. And also telling you the world is coming to an end. And this morning, of course, the stock market it opened and then closed right away. They stopped trading immediately because the market was down by enough to trigger the automatic brake on it. And when you come away from that, as you suggested, you're unsettled and your nerves get rattled. But that's the reality we face. I assume people during the great World War II bombing of London probably were more unnerved even than we are, with the German rockets flying over. But this is a moment when I think we can reflect a little bit about our lives, where we spend our time, our money, who our friends are, what we can do for the community. And in a way, when we're done with this, when it's over with, I think we will be better off for it, because we have become a very self-centered society. And the whole idea that government is the enemy will pretty much be history when this thing is over. Because right now, everyone from conservative Republicans to liberals to people who never cared about politics are hoping and praying that the government will be able to become efficient and help us through this.
It's a fascinating case study. I mean, you mentioned your textbook. I don't know if you covered anything about politics back during the Spanish flu, but that's one of the few reference points that we have going all the way back to 1918, and that's so archaic. It's hard to use that as a viable source of information with what we're confronted with now, but there are some similarities.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think is very interesting, if you look at how the response amongst the political parties, and you take the outer fringe, you take like Trump, for instance. I mean, his primary concern is in the economy and the markets, and he wanted to calm all fears out there. And then his resolution or his solution or his suggested help for America really was to bring in the captains of industry and address this from a corporate perspective. Mm-hmm. You've got libertarians out there, that edge, and they don't want to be told to do anything by anybody. And I don't know exactly where they're at on this. They might just be out going about life as normal. And then you got the Democrats, and you've got people like Bernie, for instance. He gave a great address on this, on very specific, but it's all about the people. The corporations be damned. Don't worry about taxes and government and that type of thing. Keep people alive and put money in their pockets and do everything possible to help the individual, and it's all about us as a community and kind of a huggy, fuzzy, warm kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I find that stuff very interesting.
Well, it is interesting, and of course, to be honest with you, you need both. I mean, people's jobs are directly connected to corporations, to businesses, to casinos, to restaurants and bars and cruise ships. And so you can't really serve the people and have the people have their income and be prosperous, um, if companies are not prosperous, and companies, I think, are going to re-examine how they treat their employees now, because this is a moment when companies have to take care of their employees, even if they themselves are closed. And I noticed that there's a limit to that. One of the airlines today said, we just can't do that. We just don't have enough pockets that are deep enough, and there are no more people flying. We're canceling most of our flights, and we cannot keep all these people on the payroll. So there are going to be huge layoffs of people in all the industries. I mean, the casino industry, Las Vegas is shutting down. So let's be realistic. And Bernie Sanders is an interesting person. He certainly has great big visionary ideas about how to help people and how to create healthcare for all. That seems to be his major theme. But that's way down in the future. And in the debate last night, which I watched, that's my job. I'm a political scientist. I'm required to do that.
Yeah.
Even though it was a little painful. You know, he was talking about something that doesn't exist and doesn't help us much. Right now, we are under attack. The rockets are flying in, the buildings are on fire. And to talk about how we should build better buildings that don't catch on fire in 10 years in the future just is not very helpful. And that's why most of the people who scored the debate last night said that Biden seemed much more realistic. And I sent you just a piece of a column this morning about the upcoming primaries. And Biden is way, way ahead in places like Florida and other states. I think Bernie Sanders simply has no road to getting enough delegates to get the nomination. And I think that last night and the next primaries is probably his last hurrah. And, you know, Democrats need people like Bernie Sanders and Amy Klobuchar and, you know, Kirsten Gillibrand and Elizabeth Warren in the Senate, because the president can do some things, but Democrats need to try to get a majority in the House and Senate. So frankly, when we start talking about what candidate, what person Biden might pick, assuming he gets the nomination as his vice president, I think he should not go for any of the senators or any of the people that ran against him. I think he should pick someone else.
Yeah, it sounds like he's got his mind made up. I don't know. It was almost speaking in code last night. They could have pressed him a little bit more on that, I guess. I don't know who he's thinking of. You know, and I'm always kind of, here we are in this pandemic catastrophe, and we've got a guy that wants to be president on stage, and he starts off telling everybody the big bombshell is that he's going to nominate a woman, and first thing I think of is Sarah Palin. My God.
Right.
I mean, we had a vice president.
This is the woman that he's going to pick.
Oh, yeah?
I think Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, is best because she is very experienced. She served in the House. She served in the Senate. She was a prosecutor. She's young. I think she's in good health, which would make a big difference with either of these, nursing home guys that we saw last night in the debate. And she doesn't have a national visibility where there are a lot of things that people know about her and don't like. She's very articulate, and I guess I'm not a betting guy, but if I was, I would probably put about $100 down and say that she seems to me at least, to be the one that he might pick. Anyway, that's in the future, isn't it? I mean, that's this summer's convention, assuming there is a convention. Right now, there's a discussion: are the Democrats actually going to have a convention? They're canceling primaries in some of the states.
Well, the thing about the primaries, Doc, get your politics from these political folks. Don't get your health care advice. Joe Biden was on Twitter yesterday telling everybody if they felt good and felt well, if they weren't sick, to go vote on Tuesday. Well, unless he's talking about a write-in ballot. As I mentioned at the onset, one of the problems with this coronavirus thing is you could be carrying it, you could be infected it, you could feel perfectly fine, you could be standing in a line to vote on Tuesday, infecting people all around you. I was kind of shocked, that Biden came out with that advice. Hopefully, he's thought better of it by now.
No, but what are you going to do? I mean, what are we going to do? Maybe what we need to do is to cancel all the primaries and let the super delegates at the Democratic convention pick the candidate.
Oh, hello, Hillary. It's not going to be that little known person in Michigan you talked about.
You progressives are not so happy with super delegates, but anyway, everything is up for re-examination. Devin Nunes, the infamous congressman, said, this is the best time to go out to bars and go out and party and drink and stuff because the places are not going to be very crowded. Well, really? And President Trump, honestly, we haven't heard much. He supposedly has a meeting with governors today, but I think this is the come to Jesus moment for the president. I think this is the moment when he realizes that being president of the United States has never been, and today certainly isn't, a matter of blaming everything on Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and the Democrats and tweeting nasty attacks against people that he may and in fact will need in order to come through this. The Democrats control the House. Many of the governorships are controlled by Democrats. And President Trump needs to now become disciplined. And whether that's possible or not, I don't know. But one of the reasons the stock market, I think, is doing so poorly is because investors don't have a lot of confidence in President Trump and his management abilities.
Yeah, and he said he was really happy with that Fed proclamation over the weekend to lower that interest rate. And God, I mean, I can't believe sometimes, here I am, just a guy sitting here doing a podcast talk, and when that happened, I said, oh my God, the Fed just emptied its gun. That's its last round. That's all it's got left. They're going to look at that and say, and guess what, as you mentioned, bottom out. I mean, straight down. The market had to shut itself down this morning. They looked at that and said, we got nothing left. No help from the Fed anyway. That's all they can do, as far as I know. So,
well, it's true that what you said is, brilliant. I mean, they shot their last bullet, which is you can't. Of course, in Europe, in some countries, they've gone to negative interest rates, but zero interest rates is about as bad as it gets. Now you can print money. You can have the federal government buy enormous numbers of government bonds. And pump that credit into the economy and create an even greater national debt, which is what's going to happen. I mean, we're going to come out of this, of course, but we're going to come out really damaged, hurt, with enormous costs that we have to repay. So it's not a happy time.
And what an ultimate irony that, this would, after everything that he's done and all the misgivings that people have, this could be what, as you mentioned, could bring Trump down. Everybody's always said that he looks like the betting favorite right now, but it's the economy that could bring him down. And the virus was not his doing. I mean, that was not his fault, but it could bring down his presidency and doom his reelection because people will blame him for that. And I'm reminded of a guy that I had on the podcast not too long ago, and you may have seen it, Victor Tiffany. He's the head of these Bernie or bust guys, but he said, forget about Bernie or bust. He said, look at the crossover vote. There's about 10% of the people that voted for Bernie in 2016 wanted him to be the nominee. When he wasn't, that 10% of those Bernie people voted for Trump. But he's always cautioned, or always said that the caveat to that is that they may not do that if the economy tanks. That's the one thing that could bring Trump down. If they cross over like they did in 2016 and vote for Trump just in their numbers, who they are, Trump's going to win that election, particularly in the Electoral College. But if they don't, then maybe it becomes a jump ball. So Victor's, he's an interesting guy. He's out there on one end of the spectrum, obviously, with those Bernie folks. But that's a very interesting statistic that he has, and I think it's fact.
But that is, of course, always the reality is that there are Democrats and they usually vote for the Democrat, and there are Republicans and they vote Republican. And then there are people who make up their mind and check out where things are going. And those swing voters and, voters who are not declared to any party, and in Iowa and other places, there are actually a plurality of voters. There are more people who are not members of any party or declared any party. And, all those people coming back from Europe, stuck in O'Hare and Dallas and other airports for as much as 7 hours, crowded in like little rats in an experiment. Some of those probably voted for Trump. I'm guessing there are some Republicans in there. And, they're furious. This was mismanaged. It was done with a blunt instrument and not with a scalpel, canceling all the flights and sending panic so that all those people came back at the same moment, not stocking up more individuals to do the checks and checking them through immigration. And as you said, you can hold a thermometer up to 5,000 people at O'Hare and they can all show that they don't have a fever, but they could still be carrying the virus. So it doesn't work. It does not work. The political fallout. I mean, we have all these things. The political fallout is the last thing I'm thinking about right now. It's all those people who are, so stressed out today, who work hourly wages, don't have any sick leave, don't have actual maybe health care. We do need to take care of them. And I think even Republicans realize this is a very dangerous moment and we do need to pull together. We need to see basically Nancy Pelosi and Yertle the Turtle from the Senate maybe not hugging because they're not supposed to do that, but Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi need to get at least on a telephone or Zoom conversation and say, okay, we disagree on a lot of stuff. We have a lot of issues with each other. Right now, we all agree that we have to solve this problem, and we're going to stop yelling at each other.
Well, the one person that was very presidential about this had a great speech, and nobody paid any attention to it. And I love her. We've talked about it, Tulsi Gabbard. She's got an interesting idea. She wants to, Yang wanted to do that UBI thing permanently, and a lot of people were afraid of that. She says, let's do it temporarily now. Let's put some money in the pockets of all Americans and see what happens. And we've got the money for it. We just proved it. The New York Fed just put $1.5 trillion $1.5 trillion into the economy in that repo market, to try, as you mentioned, to try to shore up the American economy. So we can do those types of things. And she says, let's see what happens. I was kind of curious about that. Before we lose you, though, I want to talk just a little bit about the debate itself last night. Now, I watched it. Okay. It was kind of depressing for Bernie followers. Bernie seems to be a kind of soft-hearted guy that's kind of an academic. He's kind of a philosopher. He's kind of big on the big picture kind of things. But he's not a politician by the current standard, and he certainly doesn't know how to go for the throat, throw that knockout punch, go after Joe Biden the way that he should. I'm watching this thing. I'm thinking, my God, Bernie, he's not even real good at defending his own Medicare for all proposal. I mean, Biden continues to tear into him on that, and he doesn't seem to be able to defend himself very well.
I was surprised, George.
Yeah.
I was surprised because when there's a crowd, when he has his supporters and Bernie bros and Bernie gals there, he's really pretty good. You know, he can throw a really powerful speech. But he didn't do that last night. And one analyst said, if there isn't a crowd there to basically juice him up, he isn't as good. And having a debate with nobody else present, I think hurt him quite a bit. Plus, I think that he is seeing the handwriting on the wall. I mean, he hasn't done well in the last bunch of primaries. He is not getting the young voters to turn out, which is the base of his revolution. He is not getting African Americans to vote for him at all in numbers that are necessary. And I think when he was standing there last night, he was realizing that, you know, he is in a very vulnerable spot right now, and he has to make a decision. When we'll see after the next set of primaries, I have a feeling he will decide what to do. You know, he may suspend his campaign, which, by the way, means that he can still go to the convention with his delegates and negotiate. If he cancels his campaign, those delegates become free agents and they can go and vote for anyone that they think, they like. Um, so we're kind of at I call it a fork in the road, which we'll see how that happens when the next primaries come down.
Well, Bernie appears to be too much of a pacifist at heart. And as you know better than anybody, politics, American politics, is not for the pacifist. I mean, you got to be able to close the deal, and he seems to be unwilling or unable to do it. Now, that said, a lot of the issues, a lot of the conversation, it's all about what he brought up.
Yes.
And, you got to give him credit for that.
Right.
He has given away his leverage. I mentioned this before, and I've talked about it on my podcast, and even I didn't understand the significance of it, but I was struck by the oddity of it when I went to see his kickoff speech here in Des Moines, Iowa. The first words out of Bernie's mouth when he hit the stage was, I will support the Democratic nominee no matter who it is. So you talk about him having his delegates and being able to leverage whether or not he's going to support someone based on their representing his issues. He's given a lot of that away. I mean,
of course, nobody believes a politician.
Well,
So
there is
he
that.
can say, I'm going to support whoever is nominated. That doesn't mean that in the end he actually has to. He can say, no, this guy or woman, well, it's going to be a guy, I think, is just the candidate of the establishment and big corporations and multinationals and the military industrial complex, and I just can't support that, so I'm going to stay neutral. He can still do that. The fact that he promised something doesn't mean much.
But he supported Hillary in 2016. I mean, my God, if he went there,
sort of.
Well,
Yeah.
he campaigned for her.
Yeah. But I think that his message to his followers seems to have been, I'm going to do this because I have to do it, but you guys decide what you want to do. And as you said, many of them decided to vote for Donald Trump. So President Trump's campaign today is having crisis meetings to decide how to move forward now. He is obviously the candidate of the Republicans, but they have to rethink how they run their campaign, because I think this is a moment when a lot of Americans would like to see unity and calm and reassurance, and not the way the campaign was moving up to this moment, which was slashing throats and digging up old things about Joe Biden's son and Ukraine and Burisma and stuff. People don't give a, I can't say that here, but crap about it.
Oh, you can.
People don't care
We're
about
online.
that. Right now, they don't care about that. They don't care if Joe Biden's son made a lot of money being on a board in Ukraine, which most people think is somewhere near Louisiana. Drop that. Move away from all of that, because it is not going to have any traction at a moment like this when people are worried about toilet paper.
And boy, they are. They're taking it by the shopping carts at Costco's across America.
As soon as we're done, I have to go into town and see if there's any toilet paper in Nevada, George.
Yeah. People don't seem to... this isolation, self-quarantine thing, I think it's easier for old boys like us. And I grew up on a dirt road. I mean, you couldn't have been more isolated. When it rained in the wintertime, you didn't go to town for a month maybe when I was a kid. There are people that go to to the grocery store every day now.
Every hour.
Just to eat. Yeah,
That's right. That's right.
They go for every meal.
I live on a gravel road that is... when it rains like this, a little slick. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
And those of us who live on a farm, we tend to stock up a little bit more than other people. But still, this is uncertain in a way that a winter storm, for example, is not, because the plows are going to come, the storm is going to blow by. And this one here is, to be honest, you brought it up. If this looks like 1929, we'd better stock up on a lot of toilet paper.
Yeah. Well, my recommendation to folks would be, do you remember cloth diapers? I mean, Those were reusable, folks. I mean, we may have to go to that place in the summertime. You may have to go out in the field and use what we called as kids velvet leaf or butter print. I mean,
That's right.
that can be used also.
In the winter, it's kind of hard to do that, George.
Yeah, in the wintertime. I'm just talking about in the summertime. And one thing about this coronavirus, before we leave here, I heard that there's a possibility that we may see a pause. Now, they expect this thing to hit its peak not until May, believe it or not, as far as these cases are concerned. No. In the warmth of summer across the United States, we may see it fall back a little bit. And the precedent for this, again, is the Spanish flu. That's what happened. But then, when the colder weather came in the fall, it reappeared with a vengeance. It was worse than it was when it first appeared. And that could be, although nobody knows for sure, what we're looking at with COVID-19.
What you just said is what is so frightening, which is we don't seem to know a lot about this virus, even though the New York Times had the absolute best graphic representation of what happens to the virus as it attacks you. So we know kind of how it does it. We know that soap, interestingly enough, and it had it in that particular article, breaks up the ability of the virus to actually penetrate your system. But we don't know a whole lot about it. We don't have a vaccine. Viruses are not bacteria. So you can use all the bacteria killing soap and other stuff. They're not bacteria, folks. Yeah. They're a virus. And penicillin, whatever other things don't really work with them. So we need the medical community, and research at universities has become more important than it's been in 100 years, because that's where the solution's going to come from.
And I hope to have more information on my podcast about that. I'm reaching out to some medical experts trying to get some real information, because you don't want to go with my opinion or my beliefs on this or anybody unless they really are vested in the scientific community. The final thing I would say, a lot of people are talking about vaccines and cures and all that kind of thing. It's a virus. The cold, the common cold is a virus. Yeah. We got nothing. We've had nothing. Everybody's been wanting to fix that forever. I mean, so I don't know if we're going to be able to fix this, or hopefully it'll just go away on its own. I just don't know.
True. And don't drink Clorox.
Yeah, that'd be a bad thing. And don't put a bar of soap in each pocket. I mean, that probably won't work. I mean,
they're drinking that bar of Ivory soap.
They were drinking. They were drinking hooch, drinking moonshine, Everclear in Iran. I saw that in the news. The people over there believed that would kill this virus, and they were drinking that. And of course, it was the hooch that was killing them. And God, yeah, that's a fact. That really did happen. It's unbelievable. Well,
it's a frightening moment, and the Chinese now were saying that it's our fault, that we may have created this and spread it.
I heard
Senator Cotton a few weeks ago said the Chinese probably were developing it in a military facility in Wuhan. So now we have these recriminations going on. None of that helps us very much. So it's time to you can't go to church, but it's time to reflect on bigger things in life.
I like that. That's a great way to end. That's great. That's our buddy. That's our pal, Dr. Stephan W. Schmidt, at home now, because they're not at the university any longer. It's all online. Of course, they're on spring break now, but when they come back in, that's how it's going to be done. And we're hoping that you'll check us out online, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to us on YouTube and all of those things, so that you can get each and every one of our episodes. We're going to wrap it up for today. That's going to do it. That's another podcast. Bye, George.